First and foremost, I want to say thank you to AEM for putting this event together. Thank you to the men and women who are serving our delicious meal today. Those that prepared our meal, want to make sure that they are recognized as well. So if you could please help me give them a round of applause. So I'm really glad to be back home today. I think I need to first recognize the great work that San Antonio is doing as it relates to the relationship with Mexico. San Antonio has always been on the cutting edge, and today is a testament to the fact that San Antonio continues to lead that discussion. Many of you play in that arena. We have excellent multinational oil and gas companies here in town. We have a great utility. We have great renewable energy companies. And so you take that and you combine it with the organizations that are focused on ensuring that the relationship with Mexico only gets stronger. And that right there is a recipe for success. And so I want to congratulate this community for all the work it's doing. As all of you know, NAFTA was signed here, and there's great hope in the audience that the renegotiated NAFTA gets signed here as well. As the first round comes to a close in the negotiations, the discussion is centered around rethinking NAFTA. Well, I think it's time to also rethink the way that we have been handling our trade of energy with Mexico from ERCOT, from the Texas perspective. Today we'll have a focus on ERCOT. As many of you know, ERCOT serves a great majority of the state of Texas. Out in West Texas, ERCOT is not present, but we still have interconnection points that are very important. What I'd like to do today is give each of our panelists an opportunity to give us just a 5-minute introduction as to what it is that your organization does, and then we'll get started with some questions. Commissioner?
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. I spent most of my summers in Brownsville. I have family here, and I believe that this is a very nice place to be and very, very nice place to make business. The Regulatory Commission, which I chair, and I'm also the CEO, is a group of commissioners and the independent group that decides in terms of what are the tariffs, what is the regulation for the market. We regulate the Mexican's ISO, and we are appointed, as it was mentioned, for 7-year periods. So we are independent from the political discussion. It is important for you to understand that we are not from any party. To be appointed, we need to be apolitical, and that's important because we don't care about all of those discussions. We are on the technical arena. And we have very strict contact rules, and that's very important for us also for you to know. For a commissioner to discuss a regulatory topic with a regulated entity, we have to be at our office, we have to have a tape recorder, we have to make a list of the things that were discussed, and we put that also in the web so that people know who are we meeting with and what the discussions were all about. All of our meetings, all of our boards are transmitted through the internet, so you can see what the decisions are, how are we making things, and what decisions are being taking place. So we're very open for business. If you talk to some of our colleagues that are here that already have a permit, we do everything through the internet. We have very limited contact with people, so that's easy for the people from remote areas of Mexico to come in and just have a computer and file all of the things that are needed to get a permit, or to file the things that are important to give us information that is relevant for the regulator. So just to finish, I would like to welcome you to visit our webpage, to come to our offices, and to make business in Mexico.
Thank you, Commissioner. A message of transparency, very important. Commissioner Sitton, can you please tell us a little bit about what you do and what your agency does, please?
Sure. Well, unlike Guillermo, I am very much in the political group. As a Texas Railroad Commissioner, we are one of only a handful of states in the United States who are elected. So anybody in Texas, all 27 million people, can vote for a railroad commissioner. And we regulate all of the oil and gas production in the state. We regulate all intrastate pipelines. We regulate coal mines. So if you want to drill a well, you want to put in a disposal well, you want to build a pipeline that doesn't cross state or federal borders, you have to come to the Railroad Commission to get a permit to do that, and you have to follow the rules that we put in place. There are actually 3 railroad commissioners. I am one of 3. All of us are statewide elected officials, and we have 2 parts to our job. One part is that we are a 3-headed CEO, and we run the agency, about 800 people that do and perform all of the functions of the regulatory capacities at the Railroad Commission. The other job is we are administrative law judges. So when a case comes up where someone contests the drilling of a disposal well or the construction of a pipeline or a rate in a gas case, those eventually come to the 3 commissioners to vote on as judges would in a civil case. So those are the primary functions of a railroad commissioner. The one thing that I will tell you, and we've talked a little bit about the fact when I was introduced that I'm the first engineer in 50 years to do this job, is that it is probably one of the geekier political jobs, and that it suits me to a T. I've spent 20 years in the industry, and what I have found in my 2 years on the job is I spend a large portion of my time going out and talking to the people of the state. And so when people ask me philosophically, what does the Railroad Commission do? I say, look, I got 27 million Texans, and virtually all of them want the energy industry to do very well because they know that the energy industry pays for our schools, pays for our roads, pays for the fact that we don't have to have income taxes. So everyone knows that the industry is very, very important to us. Everything from oil and gas production to transmission and pipelines to refining, petrochemical operations, all of it's very important. My job is to make sure that people are confident when those energy operations are near their homes and near their communities. Yes, they may not be excited about it, but if they know that it's safe, then they feel okay. And that's what I go to work to do every day.
Wonderful, wonderful. What about railroads? Don't you regulate railroads?
Not anymore.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do exactly 0. Not a little bit, not a minor component, exactly 0 to do with trains. Now, I will tell you that, and someone today will ask me about the high-speed railway between Houston and Dallas. I know nothing about that because I do, once again, 0 with trains.
Well, thank you for clarifying that for me. Appreciate that. Bill, what about ERCOT? Tell us what ERCOT stands for.
Okay, ERCOT stands for the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And we do electricity. We're not really a council, but ERCOT's 2 things. One is it's the name of a geographic area, basically. As Secretary Pablos referenced, the ERCOT region of Texas covers about 75% of the land mass, but it's about 90% of the people, the population of Texas, is where we serve as the grid operator. We're not in El Paso, we're not in my hometown of Orange, Texas on the eastern edge, but most of the state is covered by ERCOT. And that region is its own interconnect. That is, you hear people say Texas has its own electric grid. In the ERCOT region, that is true. Well, how's that different from other places? The eastern side part of the United States and the western part of the United States are all interconnected one way or another. Their energy flows can affect one another in a way that is unique to those areas, where in ERCOT, most of Texas, we have our own grid. We're not regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We're regulated by the Public Utility Commission of Texas and by the Texas Legislature. That's where we receive our guidance, and that's who approves our budget. We're a nonprofit company, but provide that service for Texans. And so what's the second ERCOT? The second ERCOT is the company, about 720 people who manage in a control room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the flow of electricity on our system. And just to make here's what you need to know about electricity. When you go home, you can tell your family, it's not really a product. It's a phenomenon that is managed, and as my friend Bill Bjork back there said, is an experiment every day. Because electricity is, with very limited exceptions, not stored. You don't keep inventory of electricity. You make it and consume it at exactly the same time. And imagine that on a system with as much power as is flowing across the ERCOT region, that's got to be balanced every single day. Other things that have to be balanced that ERCOT takes care of are in our retail markets, in the parts of Texas where there's retail competition. We manage the transactions that go between the companies to make sure they're fair. And also the electric market, which is when people talk about ERCOT, they often talk about an ERCOT market. Similar to the restructuring and reforms in Mexico, ERCOT has an open market with congestion revenue rights, financial instruments, and companies doing business in a deregulated environment, in large part, providing electricity to Texans. So ERCOT, the company, manages those tasks as we're asked by the legislature and the PUC, so that ERCOT, the region, keeps the lights on, and more importantly this time of year, the air conditioning. That's what we really need to keep on. And we think, as Chris Euchster said, we think we're okay for the eclipse. So everyone remain calm.
Well, that's great. Well, look, I think what we ought to do is have a discussion about how it is that we could bring prosperity to our region. And region should be underscored because the Texas-Mexico region needs to be globally competitive. We are the southern part of NAFTA. We have to make sure that Texas and Mexico continue to be each other's #1 trading partners. Here out of San Antonio, we've done a great job in promoting that. But how is it that we can continue to elaborate upon that through energy? How is it that energy is going to play a role? And that's a discussion I want to have. Let's dare to think, how is it that we can get to a point where we have the free flow of energy through our border to benefit both sides? We're going to need energy to be able to bring in industry. We have to make ourselves attractive. Capacity is extremely important. And so that's the discussion I want to have today. And so if I could, Commissioner Siddon, I'd like to start with you. You have been very bullish on Mexico. You've traveled to Mexico. You've met with regulators. You have an excellent position to be able to promote trade of oil and gas between Texas and Mexico. What are the opportunities that you're seeing right now? And then also, what are some of the challenges that lie ahead as we work from a government perspective, as we work with private sector to make sure that happens?
Well, this is a great question to start off with, and I'm going to try to be efficient so that everybody gets a chance to talk today.
Please.
So let me hit a couple of high points. When you look across the Mexico border, you hear the elected officials, and I was there, I guess it's been 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and it was my first international official state trip. And there was a lot of talk amongst the Mexican national figures, the Mexican elected officials, the Mexican government officials, about the needs to grow their energy usage, the population demands, even not just growth, but even transition away from coal, for example, to natural gas, conversations about pipeline construction. And what's interesting is here you have the state of Texas that around the world, if you look at amount of refining capacity, amount of crude production, amount of natural gas production, we're the #1 energy producing state in the world. If we were our own country, we'd be arguably number 4 or 5 in the world. So you got a growing demand in Mexico, and you got growing production right across the border. And as you said a minute ago, the world is continuing to consume more and more energy, and that's largely going to come from hydrocarbons for the foreseeable future, where there's no doubt the United States, and specifically Texas, is a big leader. So if we as a region want to be competitive, we need those products to be as fungible as possible and to move them across the border back and forth. And the United States, and specifically Texas, has spent, as in private industry, spent billions, if not trillions of dollars on the infrastructure, pipelines, refining capacity, oil and gas production facilities. And so there's a lot there for the Mexican government, the Mexican people to take advantage of. On the flip side, the Mexican part of the Eagle Ford Shale is, in many people, believed to be larger than the U.S. part of the Eagle Ford Shale. So you got, once again, right across the border in the United States, you've got some of the best technical excellence in drilling and production techniques. So if you look long-term as those two countries work together, opportunities for Mexico to continue to buy raw products and refined products from the United States, at the same time, the United States to partner with Mexico in building infrastructure to enable the development of its onshore oil and gas resources, both countries can benefit tremendously from that. And at the end of the day, regardless of where you are around the world, the more efficient your energy costs, the more all the rest of your economy advances. Transportation, medical, technology development. If we have the cheapest energy, we're competitive around the globe. So I think the more that we work together to share products across the border, to share natural resources, and I mean allowing private business to get in there and do business, that will benefit both countries tremendously.
Absolutely. We get there. How is it that we begin to communicate, coordinate, cooperate, collaborate in this effort, right? We have a border that divides us. We have sometimes communications barriers, language barriers. How is it that we can work together, in addition to what's already being done, to be able to identify those opportunities? So Commissioner, Chairman, I'd like to ask you, from the Mexican perspective, what are some of those opportunities you see, as the Commissioner had said, to be able to add to that free flow of energy?
Well, I think that one effort that needs to be done is to have common standards. We are working in the electrical arena with NERC and with FERC, and with also the local regulators associated in NARUC, to have a common standard, for instance, in electricity reliability. If we interconnect our systems, we have right now 5 interconnections that are, 5 that are emergency interconnections, and another 6 that are commercial interconnections. If that means that on a daily basis we are sending or receiving electricity from both countries. That is something that brings a lot of flexibility to the system, but it's also a risk. Because if there is a practice, as you mentioned, if you have to balance the system, and there is something that is not right at a certain second in time, you can bring down a whole city or a whole system. So we need to have these rules, these standards, and that's an opportunity in the NAFTA relaunching to have these standards as a goal. We are right now we have introduced the 10 best practices of the NERC protocol, and that helps us think of a more interconnected system in Mexico. As you have probably seen in the news, we had some sort of a tornado. We didn't have tornadoes in Mexico, but now you've sent them down there. So some of our infrastructure in Tamaulipas went down, and the Texas system helped us bring that system up in a few hours, and that was due to the good relationship and the interconnections that we have. So we need to have this extended. We need to have this as a daily basis. We need probably to have a North American market for electricity, and I think that will bring competitiveness and productivity to the 3 countries. I think that Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. have the opportunity of becoming the energy hub of the world. We have these things that we have complementary consumption with production, and a lot of practices that could be sent here or down there. And I think that if you read the document that the federal government in the U.S. sent to Congress to start the negotiation of NAFTA, you can see everything we aim for, no? The integration of the energy, to have market-based reforms, to have the state-owned companies working in an arm's length policy. So I think that we are on the right track of having an integrated system in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico energy market.
So it's fair to say that we ought to begin to talk about rethinking our regulatory environment as it relates to cross-border trade?
I think we should.
Fair enough. You know, we have been trading small amounts on the commercial side, electricity through our interconnects or our DC ties, Bill. And mostly we have those in place, as you mentioned, for reliability purposes, right? But Bill, is it reasonable to envision a day when we're actually trading electricity from a commercial perspective between Texas and Mexico, between ERCOT and Mexico?
Well, currently, as Secretary Pablos referenced, there are we call DC ties, which are electrical ties that can be opened and closed. All of the connections between ERCOT and Mexico and ERCOT and the rest of the United States are these controllable DC ties. The total amount of electricity that can flow over the DC ties in Texas, there are 3 of them, is 430 megawatts. And just to put that in scale, if you had the ERCOT app, you'd know that right now there's 60,801 megawatts on our system, right? So 430 in the context of a system that runs on hot days between 60 and 70,000 is not a whole lot. There is growing discussion, clearly, amongst parties on both sides of the border about, should there be the ability to trade in larger amounts. with either with new capacity DC ties or other approaches. So I think we'll see those discussions ongoing. I think the chairman's reference to the standards is critical. One of the things that has gone very well in the electric industry is the setting of standards, and they're critical. I mean, you can't run the system safely unless you have agreement on what these physical standards are. And the NERC, is the North American Electric Reliability Council. That's the standard-setting body, and we already had that experience because NERC has provided standards for the U.S. and Canada for many years, and we've run on a similar system. And NERC is very proud of the memorandum of understanding with the Mexican government, with the Mexican entities, to try to expand that into the North American kind of market we're talking about. And the key to, now Commissioner Sitton's going to think I'm trying to make up nice to him, but the key to that is one of the great things about the electric industry is when it comes to the standards and when it comes to the day-to-day operation of the system, engineers get really involved. It's technical people talking to technical people. Not as many lawyers, but and I think and we've seen we've had collaborations with the ministry as the reforms got underway, talking about how it is we've run the market in the ERCOT region and the lessons learned for our cross-border relationship.
So Bill, so we have this small amount of electricity being traded. What about the regulatory environment for being able to facilitate that? Do you foresee an opportunity at ERCOT, at PUC, to be able to start talking about some of the rules that are in place right now and how to rethink those rules in order to facilitate? Is that a possibility?
I think the discussions concerning how we handle generation units that can switch in and out of the ERCOT region have been a big issue of discussion, and that's in this ERCOT stakeholder process, where a lot of the technical people get together and our market rules are developed by the folks who are in the business, both consumers and generators, as well as transmission companies, thinking about are we handling that in the way that protects reliability but also fosters increased business exchange while keeping ERCOT state jurisdictional and not opening ourselves up to federal jurisdiction. So yes, I think those discussions are underway around how to facilitate those kinds of transactions to where both SENACE on the Mexican side, ERCOT on the Texas side, as well as our counterparts in MISO and SPP, the other independent system operator regions, can feel like they can get what they need when they need it, but we can also facilitate as much trade as possible.
So you're in constant contact with your counterpart in Mexico on a regular basis?
I would say at our staff level, there is a lot of collaboration. Because again, it's the key things are making sure that you're getting operations rules and communications lines as open and flexible as possible, so that on those days when there's a problem in Tamaulipas or there's a problem in South Texas and we need to lean on one another, there's no hesitation around making those things happen.
As a Secretary of State, I'm also the Border Commerce Coordinator. I wear that hat as well. And in that role, my job is to ensure that we have economic development activities that favor the border on both sides of the border. And it's no secret that reliable and affordable electricity is a component that is considered whenever investment is being made, particularly with manufacturing. Manufacturing, as you know, consumes a lot of electricity. And so being able to provide affordable, reliable electric capacity on both sides of the border is very important. And so I would think that the trade in electricity, if it makes the electricity more affordable for the Mexican manufacturing to occur, it ultimately will benefit Texas. And so I would love to see an effort that begins the process of rethinking that, as you said, Bill, and I'd love to work with you. Mm-hmm. Commissioner, what about on the oil and gas side? We have limitations in electricity because of these interconnects. What about, are we seeing an increase in transmission along the border? What are you seeing there?
Well, I think I've got these numbers right in my head. Mexico today imports something like 600,000 barrels a day of refined products and somewhere around 4 billion cubic feet a day of natural gas. And roughly 50 to 60% of both of those come out of the United States. And that demand has gone up substantially, and it continues to climb. When you look at projections, you can see those numbers continuing to go up. And it seems like today the American companies are very much want to participate in that. I think there's 4 new pipelines this year alone to carry refined products, natural gas into Mexico. I would say, going back to, we talked about a regulatory framework on the electrical side. I think that the other, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but the other meeting point that needs to happen is there's I'll say cultural differences, but expectations for economics around how commerce is done, right? You've got, in the United States, from a regulator perspective, my job is not to drive business. My job is to make it easy for people to do business. So I say to a guy who wants to build a pipeline, we want to make sure that pipeline is safe, and then the legislature grants certain authorities to that pipeline to go in and capture land and do the things they need to do to get that thing built. Part of my role with Mexico is to meet or work with my counterparts on the other side to say, look, if an American company wants to come in and build a pipeline or build an avenue to deliver diesel or deliver natural gas, how can you make that as effective as possible? In the short run, there's always little decisions around buying and selling of a certain commodity. In the long run, making it most efficient for the country of Mexico and its citizens to capture that energy may be different decisions around how that infrastructure is constructed. And so once again, when I speak to my counterparts in Mexico, there is much more of a sense of the government driving the business, right? Outlining how that business will be done, being much more prescriptive than we are on the American side. Being a proud American, we always think, well, the way we do it is right, and I'm sure my Mexican counterparts think the same thing, but the more we can meet and there's agreement on how do we allow that private investment of corporations to bring those products, the better it will be. And I think that opens up the opportunity for the Mexican people to leverage U.S. products at a really competitive rate.
And that brings up a good point about private investment. Chairman, what are you all doing in Mexico to ensure that you remain attractive for private investment? My particular interest is ensuring that Texas companies have that opportunity to participate in the Mexican market. And so what is it that you're doing to make yourself more attractive?
There was a shift in the recent reform in which we just left a little bit behind the past idea of having everything driven by the state-owned companies. The reform is based on a permit obtaining industry in which, for instance, Valero announced just a few weeks ago that they were building this big facility in Veracruz, in the center of Mexico, to provide gasoline and diesel to Mexico City. What was needed? Just to go to come to the regulator, ask for a permit. The permit will be awarded. It is not yet been awarded, but it's a first come, first served idea. So Pemex and CFE will continue doing their business, but there's the possibility of private entities come to Mexico and find out which consumers want to have an alternative and sign contracts with them on a free basis, on a market-based regulation. And I think that we will be moving to a more market-based economy of energy in Mexico.
So are you all seeing a great interest from Texas companies wanting to invest? Bill, are you hearing anything about generators or whomever looking into the Mexican market as an opportunity? Same question for you, Commissioner.
I think on the electric side, we hear from participants in the market who, particularly who are generating power, who are interested in, could they make arrangements for contracts on the Mexican side, particularly with manufacturing. We had one power plant that's right on the U.S.-Mexican border that's sort of in a unique circumstance in that it's one of these that can switch back and forth, that made a decision to completely disconnect from ERCOT and serve exclusively into Mexico. And that was because of a business opportunity for them that I think emerged with the reforms. So there's certainly some interest on that part, and we may see. I can't help but think that's going to continue as the reforms continue to take effect.
Commissioner?
I would add that we certainly see interest, and in fact, it's not uncommon for smaller operators, whether they be oil and gas producers or midstream companies, who will come and ask me, Ryan, what are you seeing? What are your thoughts on this? So there's certainly interest. let's call a spade a spade. These reforms are new, and there's another presidential election coming up, and one of the components of the discussion in that campaign is what these energy regulations are going to look like, or the reforms are going to look like. Doesn't matter what country you're in, regulatory instability or inconsistency is something that always makes businesses tighten up their investment. Businesses want to see a consistent environment. They want to know what's coming. So I think that while there is interest, there's also hesitancy because there are differences, and there's some concern about the long-term future of these reforms and whether they will be advanced or rolled back. I will go back to the comment I keep making about what happens today. As I said, I think we sell as a country close to 300,000 barrels of the refined products that go into Mexico come to the United States. And the more that happens effectively, the more that there are good trade deals done, and that the companies here are benefiting, and they're having a good relationship, and the Mexican counterparts are benefiting, the more that generates additional interest. So that as that track record builds, yes, I mean, Valero's here, we'll pick on Valero. If Valero is selling products to Mexico, and that benefits Valero, and on the flip side, the Mexican government is saying, yes, we're providing cheap refined fuels to our country, and that's a win-win, that definitely bolsters additional investment. So I think that the more that we see the companies that are already there benefiting and feeling the stability, that will cause additional growth pretty quickly.
And as the chairman mentioned, I think Mexico is doing a great job in ensuring that they send out message, that they articulate the message of regulatory instability. What are you hearing from the U.S. companies that are coming to Mexico who are already doing business there? What is the take that you have on their experience?
Well, I think that they have these questions on the regulatory future of Mexico. But as you know, the change was very profound. It was a constitutional amendment. For you to change the Constitution, you need 2/3 of Congress, and you need 1/2+1 of all of the state Congresses. So it is something that was so hard to do that it is hard for it to become another time a reality. No? There's a stability in the legislature part of it. As I mentioned, the regulators, both of us, there's a sister regulator entity that goes to the upstream arena, and we are both independent constitutional bodies, and we are both appointed for 7-year terms, and we can be re-elected. In that case, we can go and do some politics and get some votes, and we can be re-elected for another 7-year term. So you would have the regulators sitting there for 14 years. That's like Supreme Court in Mexico, no? It's a very long term. So we think that that gives companies some assurance that the regulatory framework won't change. And there's a very good example. We have more than 129 companies coming to Mexico in the energy, in upstream, downstream, electricity. 129 companies that were not there from 18 countries. And the big companies from the US, for instance, came to Mexico to a bid that was awarded on December 5. It was a month after the US election. No? There was some uncertainties on how the new administration will work with us. But a month after the election, big companies like Chevron, Exxon, you name it, came to Mexico and signed contracts, long-term contracts for deep water exploration and extraction. That is not something you do if you are worried about the future, the regulatory future of a country. No, so there's been some interesting signals in terms of, as you mentioned, the transparency, the way the processes are being carried out, the way the companies can talk to the regulators, and the way the regulators say no to some things, but we say yes to the things that are reasonable, and there's a very good dialogue there.
I think that's very promising. You know, as a former electricity regulator, the direction we received from the governor was to make regulation fair, make it transparent, and make it predictable. And so, Bill, I wanted to ask, with respect to your relationship with the PUC, could you speak to that a little bit so that folks can understand what that interplay looks like?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned at the outset, we are fully regulated by the Public Utility Commission, and ERCOT as an organization, as the independent system operator, was essentially set up by statute by the Texas legislature. So we are very responsive to the needs of the commission as well as the legislature. And I think one of the central successes of the reforms of energy or electric policy in Texas has to do with that strong commitment that the legislature and the PUC have had to those changes ever since. Even when they're under stress in various ways, there's been a lot of very strong commitment, and that manifests itself in maintaining the market structure that we have, and it's fiddled with, and we adjust the dials frequently, but we've maintained a market structure. And secondly, Texas built around $7 billion worth of transmission to bring wind power from the more remote parts of the state where the wind blows best into the cities, into the urban areas. And that was a tremendous infrastructure investment that you just don't see most places in the country happen as fast as it did. People are still talking about doing something like that in a lot of places, but it was that strong political commitment to make this thing work that really drove that.
And related to that is also technology. We deployed, 7 million smart meters?
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the initiatives that you have in place related to that to be able to move ahead and stay on the cutting edge?
Sure, yeah, the smart meter deployment was an enormous shift for utilities all over Texas. And we now, when we settle the market, we're basically the clearing agent that settles out the market. Over 98% of the electric transactions that happen are settled on smart meters or settled on very recent data. That doesn't occur a lot of places. And that technological change has, number one, assisted the utilities who implemented it to manage their systems remotely a lot more effectively than they could and cut their costs of service to consumers. But then also opens up possibilities for a lot of things from Nest thermostats to on down the line for home energy management. It opens up a lot of prospects for using consumer demand as part of the system, a demand response type program. And I think we're just beginning to see the ways in which technology, both through smart meters and then internet-enabled devices, is going to change how we relate to electricity in our own homes. I think CPS here is a leader in a lot of the demand response areas, and we're starting to see how that can shift what we're seeing on the grid.
Right, and emphasis on the great work the CPS has been doing. I mean, being on the cutting edge. Chris, you all are doing a great job in ensuring that you stay on top of things. So I did want to congratulate CPS as well. What about you, Commissioner? What technology are you seeing out there that will help us stay ahead of the curve and anticipate market changes so that we can continue to be the leader?
There's been a lot of technology developments in the oil and gas industry in the particularly the last 15 years. In fact, if you look back from the early 80s until the early 2000s, there's about a 20, 25-year span there where the oil and gas, particularly the E&P sector, the oil and gas production just kind of declined, not a whole lot of advancement. And a lot of people think it was hydraulic fracturing. It wasn't. Hydraulic fracturing had been around since the late 40s, early 50s. But the combination of long laterals with multi-stage hydraulic fracturing due to a technology called slick water is what had opened up a lot of these shale developments. And all of a sudden, Texas oil production from 2007 to 2014 grew from about 1 million barrels a day to 3 million barrels a day. So tripled the oil production in the state of Texas. As we look today, though, to market responses, I think when I talk, it's less, not that technology is not important, but it's how technology affects an overall infrastructure mix. So if I just had oil production in the state of Texas, that by itself wouldn't make me globally competitive. If I just had the largest section of pipelines, literally over 400,000 miles of pipelines in the state of Texas, that by itself wouldn't do it. If I just had the most complex refining infrastructure in the world, that wouldn't do it. You put all these things together with import-export terminals, those things together are what make the state of Texas so globally competitive. And that's why people around the world, from Japan buying natural gas in China to selling refined products in Europe, everybody is looking to the state of Texas and the United States now as an energy provider. So when I go across the border to Mexico, and I get back to what I was talking about before, as their demand grows and they are strategizing about how to play in this area. And by the way, go back to something I said a minute ago. I give a lot of credit to the country of Mexico. The reforms that they made, what's it been, 6 years ago now?
No, it's 3.
3 years ago? Seems like forever.
Felt like 6.
Yeah, it felt like 6. Those are, I would say those are the biggest changes in an energy policy that any country has made in the last couple of decades. So they really ought to be proud of that. But those things don't change overnight. So a change in policy, how does that extend as they look at their strategy and say, where can we compete? Well, how do we leverage our partners across the border? Texas has got all this amazing infrastructure. We have to leverage those products, but at the same time, we do have a lot of natural resources. So going back to this technology question, how can we leverage their drilling technology, their completion technology, their transportation capabilities to develop what is a fairly undeveloped southern portion of the Eagle Ford under the Mexican, across the Rio Grande? So I think that as we look at the market around the world, and how does that market respond when there's too much demand or not enough production? Or vice versa, that we need more production. Well, these days, the ability to go in and produce new oil and gas quickly is something that's been a dramatic change. Somebody could go out and spud a well in Texas and put 3,000 barrels a day on the market in a matter of months. 10 years ago, that was an impossibility. So the ability to respond to market demands, whether it be in a refinery or through a pipeline or at an exploration and production, a gas well or oil well, that's very different. And as Mexico comes into their own and doing that same kind of development, there'll be opportunities for both Texas and the United States and Mexico to benefit tremendously.
Texas companies, Governor Abbott is focused on ensuring that Texas companies have a pole position, have that advantage needed to be able to step into the Mexican market. And so, Commissioner, I have a question for you. Well, you have a great audience here. You have a lot of decision makers here playing in this arena. What would you say to Texas companies looking to come into the Mexican market, to invest in the Mexican market, and help build this regional integrated energy economy that we're looking to do? What would you say to them?
Well, as Commissioner mentioned, you have developed a very strong service companies in the Eagle Ford and in the shale plays. And the CNH, the other regulator, will launch in a few months round 2.5. That will be unconventional, and that will be also very close to Texas. So it will be a very good opportunity for service providers to increase the scale of service. There can be many gains for both sides of the border, since you have economies of scale. You don't use all the equipment all the time in all of the fields. So there can be a very important complementarity in the service providing arena. But also, if you want to be an operator, there's operators here that work in both sides of the border. So there will be an opportunity also for you to work there. And well, there's all of the opportunities in the world, no? You have the service stations. We have just announced the entrance of, for instance, Tesoro, Valero, as I mentioned, Chevron. All of the companies are looking into Mexico. We are the 4th consumer in the world of gasoline and diesel. So there's a very interesting market that is not well served. For instance, 40% of our cities have no service station. You don't see that in the US, no? Even the smallest city has a service station. So in Mexico, you have to go to another city to get your gasoline. Mm-hmm. And that is a nonsense, but that was the model that we had in terms of a state-owned company trying to plan for the services in Mexico. So there's a huge opportunity for the biggest refining center in the world, that is Texas, to go down and try to get a chunk of the market, offering good prices, offering a very competitive, contributing to a competitive environment in Mexico. And we are very willing to hear all sorts of opportunities. I would also like to mention that the storage in electricity is something that is changing, will change things in a few years. So that's also something that we need in Mexico. We have zero storage, and that, I think that would be a very good opportunity, since we have a very important potential for solar or wind power, as you have in Texas. And well, the sky's the limit.
Great. We have a couple of questions. One has to do with what we've talked about, the political cycles, government impeding progress, meaning, if we switch governments every so often, will that be driving it? And so I would just paraphrase this and ask, what is private sector's role in all this? Will private industry drive this? In my experience in working cross-border, it's been very important for the private sector to get involved. It's the private sector that really drives. And so very quickly, what is your take on this? And the question is to all three of you.
Well, I don't seek votes, and I never will. So I'm probably least qualified to answer. I think that one of the keys to success, I think that ERCOT has experienced, is to have a very strong process where all of the businesses involved in the electric sector, which is just about everybody, are engaged. The way that rules are made in the ERCOT process involves power generators, municipal utilities like CPS, companies that just own poles and wires, but it also involves consumers. In fact, Valero, one of Valero's employees is a member of our board representing industrial consumers. So if you've got all of the stakeholders involved, and I think this is true in Texas and certainly true along the border, you have very big users of the product who become demanding because it's a lot of their cost of doing business. You can bring to whomever the regulators are the full picture. And so I think ensuring that whatever mechanisms are set up, whether in ERCOT or in the oil and gas business or in Mexico, give real voice to all of those different stakeholders in these critical industries is going to be the best bet to riding out whatever political waves occur.
Texas has a long history of being proud of the fact that our government powers are limited. What's going to cause growth here, and even in trade with Mexico, from a Texas, from an American side, will be demand from consumers for products, demand for additional services, and private businesses will be the ones to respond to that. It won't be the regulators. There is one area, to get a little bit in the minutia of the Railroad Commission, when people get natural gas at their homes, the actual lines that carry natural gas to their homes are regulated by us, by the Railroad Commission. But still, the private company makes that investment. They're the ones that have to expect a return on that investment, and we simply regulate the rates that they charge and somewhat the degree to which they can build and where they can and can't build those lines. It's a long way of saying the thing that delivers in Texas is a relatively stable regulatory framework, because our capacity is limited here. And so since that's kept in check, businesses from small to very large do business knowing that whether Ryan Sitton wins his next election or not, the regulatory framework probably isn't going to change a lot. We very much move with the market, and that's served us well for a long time. And I think that stability is one of the reasons that Texas economy has outstripped all the other states in the union and many other countries around the world for the last 10 years.
I would say that it's also important in Mexico, the thing that we don't have local regulators. We can move really fast. We can talk to states, we can talk to the federal government in the US, and we can change things quite fast. No? In Mexico, the states have no power over electricity, no powers over oil and gas. And that's one of the reasons why we are moving so fast, because, for instance, in my ward, there's 7 commissioners. I have to convince them that this is the right thing to do. And if I get their vote, then the regulation is put in place. So it's probably the model that is good for us right now, to move fast and to have the certainty that you don't have to go and talk to a lot of people regarding energy. You do have to go to the municipalities to get the land permit and just the standard things that you need to go to the local governments. But regarding energy, in Mexico, you have to talk to one regulator.
Got it. So I'm trying to sort through all these questions, almost all of them highly technical. And so I wanted to get to a more general question here, and it's for you, Commissioner. Of all Once all of the max retail prices have been lifted, do you feel that the U.S.-Mexico import-export market will stabilize and move more like a free market?
I hope so, and that's the reform. And we have opened, for instance, we have retired. There was a formula for prices in natural gas in Mexico. We took that out of the regulation in June, and right now we are trying to build these marketing specialities in Mexico. No, there's a lot of people that have the gas in the U.S. right now are marketing the natural gas by their own, no, not through the state-owned company, and that's a big shift. 40%, 44% of the capacity of the system now is in the hands of the private sector in natural gas. Natural gas is somehow the head of the arrow, no, because it is a market that has been in the developing stage for many years, but we think that we have already got it where it should stand to start becoming a free market. We will be doing the same thing with gasoline and with LPG and all of the other oil products that we work with, and that's the idea, to get a market. But we cannot leave the regulated price up until the moment that we see the dominant having some challenges. No? Because if we leave the monopoly with the price determination, that is not good. No? It's not good. So we need to have at least some competition, and then we will leave the regulated prices, and then we will have the market that we all aim to.
Excellent. I've selected this last question simply to illustrate the need for information about how to do business in Mexico. It says, if I need terminal storage unit in Mexico, what will be the steps taken to get a permit? And so that raises the issue of being able to communicate how it is that one from Texas can come and do business in Mexico. And so I think a lot of that is already occurring through our chambers. But what would you recommend would be a step that a Texas company can take to be able to address issues like permits?
Well, the permits are, well, most of you are fluent in Spanish, so that won't be a problem, or there's advisors in Spanish that are very fluent in Texas. And all the information is in the webpage. We can send you the links to where is the need for you to, the things you have to do to get a permit. These are not difficult things to get. No, you need to have a good design. A third party has to say that you comply with the standard and that the design is okay regarding that standard. You have to go to the protection agency, to the safety and security agency to get a permit as well. But it is all first come, first serve, as I said, and you don't need to come to Mexico, no? I think that through Alejandra we can send the links, and if there are any questions, we can answer them through the web, no?
Excellent. So as we begin to wrap it up, I'd like to recap a little bit, and I think the one thing that stands out the most is the need to harmonize our relationship at this level, at the technical level, at the regulatory level, being able to have regulations that are aligned with each other in order to facilitate the trade. We've talked about the fact that Mexico has taken great steps in ensuring that they have transparency in their regulatory process, and I want to congratulate you for that. The fact that you're an independent regulator speaks volumes of how far Mexico has come, and so for that, I wanted to congratulate you, Chairman Commissioner. With respect to ERCOT, I think that there are a lot of opportunities ahead, especially as it relates to cross-border trade of electricity. I'd love to work with you and the PUC and whomever else is available at the federal level to make sure that we at least begin the process of talking about commercial trade, continue to focus on the reliability, but also look at the rules that are in place right now and see if they can be tweaked in any way to facilitate that trade. Mm-hmm. And Commissioner, for you, I think with respect to oil and gas, the opportunities are there for us, for Texas companies, and And companies from other parts of the world that are located in Texas, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to participate. We would love to make sure that they get to the front of the line. And so being able to communicate how it is that these companies can do business in Mexico, for me personally, is a top priority. I'd love to leave you all with just a few minutes to say some last words. So Bill, maybe we'll start with you, please.
All right. Well, I think as Secretary Pablos just reiterated, it is a time of great change and great opportunity. I think that's true in the U.S.-Mexican relationship, and the Texas-Mexican relationship, but also in the technologies we're dealing with, the changes, and on the electric side, we're investing in new kinds of resources, in changing how demand responds, as I mentioned, and adding new infrastructure on transmission. So it's not just a static situation in which we find ourselves trying to develop these new frameworks and relationships. It's during a time of great development and change. So I think it's a challenge, but one that certainly from the steps that have been taken so far on both sides, I think we're up to.
Commissioner?
It's okay, I'll get a little philosophical.
Please.
As we close out today. You know, in the language, in the world of politics today, in the United States, it's become very negative, very antagonistic. Just a lot of vitriol goes back and forth, and that affects everything. It affects the way we communicate with each other in a state legislature, the way campaigns are waged on television, and it affects, I think, a lot of opinions about other countries and what trade really means. You know, the average Texan, the average American doesn't have enough information to understand those things. And the reason a forum like this is so important, as I said, the reforms happened 3 years ago that are going to take time to really become meaningful are important, because the more that trade is positive for both Americans and Mexicans, the more we have something positive to point to. And that is bigger than just energy. It's bigger than just border trade. It's looking for a positive message about the direction of our nations and our portion of the continent, of the world. And so I think that it will take time, there'll be frustrations, but the more that there are good experiences, there's more things we can point to and brag about on both sides of the Rio Grande. That is really good for the entire world, and people need to see that, and they need to see those examples, because too often they fall beneath the negative controversies that tend to dominate the media world that we see today. So I appreciate everybody being here, and I'm really excited about the potential for these sort of things to be part of our future.
Well,
Chairman.
thank you for the invitation again, and we see the U.S. and Texas in particular as part of our community. We don't follow the idea that we can have a development that is an isolated way of developing our country. We know that we have a very intense commercial relationship, and it is needed in terms of having the production of the U.S. and Mexico pumped up, and also the consumption of both countries. I would also like to add that in Mexico, we are not afraid of making mistakes. We do know that we will be making mistakes. In Mexico in the past, people didn't make mistakes, and even if they made mistakes, they did everything to say that they didn't make that mistakes. So
that's not just a Mexican thing, by the way.
but that was our history, you know? And I think that that's some of a little bit philosophical as well. We are in the business of trust, and us commissioners work to get things done. Regulation is not something that has to be nice, but has to be done. It has to be minimal. But once industry knows that you're doing the best technical assessment you can, and the decision is based upon those strong assumptions or data that you get from the technical arena, and that trust is important. And I think that once you acknowledge that you want to get the industry's trust, and you are willing to make mistakes, but not only make mistakes, but to correct or to make things work out after these things happen. That's one of the explanations I make myself on how industry is in Mexico right now. 129 companies coming to Mexico, going to their boards, and putting money below the earth, no? And you really put the capital into the earth. So I think that that's something that you should acknowledge in Mexico, no? That we're willing to hear from industry and to do the regulation that works best for Mexico first, but also for industry. So,
Thank you, and I think you said it. I think the key word here is trust. We need to make sure that in spite of all of the background noise that's occurring, that we stay focused on the relationship, on continuing to strengthen the relationship between Texas and Mexico. We have to understand, and everyone here can certainly go out and amplify the message, a strong Mexico creates a strong Texas. And so we have to make sure that we work with Mexico to continue to make it stronger, to provide Mexico what it needs so that it can become stronger, so that we can become stronger as a region. And it is this region right here that needs to stay competitive, globally competitive. And by working together and making sure that at the local level, we work together and we trust each other, I think is very important. Ambassador Garza, you've been doing a great job with that message, and so I want to congratulate you for everything that you're doing to make sure that we continue to amplify this message. You have here, folks, here that are invested in that relationship, in that trust, and so know that in San Antonio and in Texas, you have people who care about the relationship, who want to see it go forward, and want to make sure that we continue to bring prosperity to this region. So with that, I'd like to ask that you help me give this great panel a round of applause, and thank you for being here. Thank you very much. Gracias. And thank you to everyone. Thank you for being here today. That concludes our program. Thank you. Oh, never mind.
Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for this great discussion. It was really a privilege having the opportunity to listen from the main officials, all these point of views and perspectives. We hope everybody enjoy and learn from this panel about the state of the energy affairs between Texas and Mexico. Please bear with us for 2 more minutes, as we would like to make some important announcements. From the AEM Energy Committee, we will plan additional roundtables with the National Hydrocarbons Commission, and we will also present a conversation in the following months about the important topic of industrial safety and environmental issues with the Energy Agency of the ASEA, in charge of these matters. We have been working with previous Border Energy Forum partners to bring together in Houston the key energy players from North America at the end of November. Stay tuned for more information. Finally, we would like to let you know that our Energy Committee will undergo an important stage of institutionalization of its leadership, and new memberships to participate in the formation of our annual programs and to collaborate at different levels with our organization. We look forward to continue this conversation with each one of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alejandra, and thank you again, all of you, for coming today. This is a really quick announcement for our next luncheon. It's going to happen on Wednesday, September the 27th. It's going to be about economic development between Texas, Mexico, and Israel. So we're having people from Israel coming here, and it's going to be Shailai Lufshis. He's consul for energy and economic affairs for the U.S. So I hope you can join us also on September the 27th. And what else? Rafael?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you, for coming.
muchas gracias, Rubén. Muy bien, muy bien. Thank you.